Welcome to Solutions with Courtney Anderson. I am Courtney Anderson. This is episode 202, episode 202 of this program. And it is one of our Myth Warriors series. This is one of our Myth Warriors series where we are going to examine an idea. And we're going to ask, is it an accurate statement of fact, or is it a myth, a fallacy, a misunderstanding, even a falsehood? So in our Myth Warrior series, we, again, are aggressive, we are warriors, we are out there poking and prodding concepts to determine whether or not they are something that we should integrate into our decision-making process to help us ensure that we are surpassing our goals, or are they something that we potentially should discard as not accurate, falsehoods, fallacies, even lies. So in this show today, for episode 202, we have a really great topic. The topic on the show today is, you cannot make another person happy. You cannot make another person happy. Wow. Well, that's the show. That's the question. Can we make another person happy or not? And so we know that when we delve into our episodes that we always have a healthy dose of skepticism. You know, we're deploying our critical thinking skills. And one of the things that you'll see, and I always encourage you and ask you to drop by CourtneyAnderson.com. That is our central website. On CourtneyAnderson.com, we have hundreds and hundreds of pages of content. There are individual show pages for every single one of our shows. Of course, this is episode 202. We also have a companion show to this, our audio talk show. We have our companion video talk show. And we have articles, we have blog postings, we have new seminars and webinars and all types of exciting things that are happening on CourtneyAnderson.com. So come on by and come to the show page. On the show page, you'll see the links to content that I mention or things that I discuss in the program today. So we started off this show, and again, it's one of those things, this topic, right? You cannot make another person happy. We've heard this. And some of us hear this and think, well, that's true. I can't really make anybody else happy. They're in charge of their own lives. They're in charge of their own happiness. And other people hear this and think, well, that's not true. You know, that's what we do in some settings. You know, as a parent, as a grandparent, as a spouse, as a friend, as a boss, as a coworker. You know, as a child, as a neighbor. You know, what we're doing is trying to make people happy, right? Like, that's my job when I'm somebody's, you know, sibling, when I'm your best friend. My job is to make you happy. How dare we have a show that says you cannot make another person happy? Because aren't there entire purposes of relationships that are built on this premise? And so again, it's something that we need to address. Because if we can make other people happy, if it's something that we can do, then my next step would be to ask myself, well, am I doing this as much as I should be doing it? And if I can make other people happy, then how do I do it? What are the steps that I need to do to make sure that I'm, you know, living up to my job? So there's a lot that's sort of bundled with this question. And in the alternative, if the show is not a myth, if it's actually an accurate assessment that I cannot make another person happy, and you cannot make another person happy, if that's accurate, well, wow. Well, what does that mean for me in all the aforementioned relationships? You know, what does it mean for me with someone I love and care about if I can't make them happy? What do? I just stand there and watch them be miserable? I just view them self-destruct or self-sabotage? Do I just stand around and see them in pain and I just stand there and say, well, it's not a myth. I cannot make another person happy. There's really nothing I can do. What do you do with that? And, you know, does it render us impotent? Just to sort of be forced to the sidelines and observe when someone that we care about is unhappy, nothing we can do. Can't make another person happy. it's sort of a bleak alternative. When we explore that and think about it, makes us maybe a little sad or unhappy, right? This idea that there's nothing you can do. So let's dive in. And when you go to the show page, I started off, as I often do, thinking, okay, what do we have in popular culture as a discussion point to begin our analysis and our discovery of whether or not this might be accurate, right? And therefore not a myth, or it might actually be a myth. So here we are. You go to the show page, again, CourtneyAnderson.com, and just go to the episode 202 page, which is, of course, entitled for the episode, You Cannot Make Another Person Happy. I went to Oprah. We often do. And so I went to Oprah.com, and what do I see? There's a quote there. There's an article. It's all about, the article is entitled Spreading Happiness. How to Make People Happy. Wow, okay. This is intriguing because it directly goes to the heart of our question. Our question is, can I make another person happy? And this article talks about how I can do it. So it presupposes if there's a way that how to do it, then it already answers the question of whether or not I am able to do it, right? And it has some tips. It has a multiple amount of tips to help us deploy our plan and our process for making other people happy. And one of the things that I quoted on the show notes is this right here. So I'm going to read it. This is from Oprah.com, and the link is on, of course, CourtneyAnderson.com on our show page. So the link is right there, and here's some of what the content says from the Oprah piece on how to make someone happy or how to make people happy. All right, it says, to make someone's day, all you have to do is stay physically near her while remaining in a state of contentment, humor, compassion, or calm. Try getting deeply happy around any loved one, acquaintance, or stranger. Refuse to let go of your good mood. You don't have to say or do anything else. Really. So that's great. Here it is right from Oprah, Oprah's website, a piece that's telling us here's something that I can do. I just have to go physically near somebody, and I have to remain in my state of contentment, humor, compassion, or calm. I need to get deeply happy around a loved one, acquaintance, or stranger. I need to refuse to let go of my good mood. But I don't have to say or do anything else. Really. All that sounds good. In fact, we've done other programs where we talk about being of service, and we talk about little things that we can do, smiling at someone or greeting them, complimenting someone, and remembering that we're not in other people's, totality of their experience, and maybe just greeting someone or saying to someone, oh, you look nice, or, great tie. That may be the nicest thing that someone said to them in who knows how long. We don't know the impact that we will have in other people's lives with our behaviors. So we talked about in that program and many other programs, we talk about doing what we can, in terms of even little teeny investments of time, little investments to, zero money. Just sharing a little bit of gratitude, appreciation, acknowledgement. We talked about how so many people in life feel that no one even sees them, like they don't really exist. We've done a show, right, where we addressed that issue. The show topic was, I feel invisible. We talked about that. So we have lots of shows that I encourage you to explore where we talk about different aspects of this. But the central question today, we really haven't head-on addressed. If I am able to make another person happy, right? If I can make another person happy, then should I? My point would be yes, of course you should. It's an incredible power. So if I have the power to make another person happy, I should deploy it and use it as much as I can. Of course, I should start with myself, I would argue. And even this Oprah piece says that you have to, be in your state of contentment and humor and compassion and calm. You have to be deeply happy. Well, you can't do all that if you're not happy yourself. So that I guess presupposes that you've already, deployed your happiness tools, with yourself. Part of the challenge, though, is when we look at real life, we can certainly spread goodwill, positive energy, be motivating and uplifting. We can be grateful. We can acknowledge other people. We can do a lot of these things. But does the research show us that that alone, our endeavors alone, would be enough to convert someone from a behavior pattern who was unhappy into happy? Can we just do that for them? Can we do that heavy lifting? So I kept researching, as I always am, and I've shared in other programs that one of the topic areas I love studying is psychology. Now, certainly we talk a lot about psychology within the workplace because that's, of course, one of my focus areas is the workplace relationship expert, the industrial organizational part of psychology and workplaces. But my interest, extends certainly beyond just the workplace, and a lot of the things we talk about at work also apply outside of work. So an area that we've addressed and mentioned in other shows, this idea of positive psychology. And this idea of what it sounds like. Is there a process, a methodology, is there research and data in terms of, positive outcomes, in terms of behavior and attitudes? And so I've got some links on the show page. And one of the individuals that I'm going to encourage you now to research a little bit if you don't already have familiarity with their work is a prominent scholar and scientist in this area. He has passed away, but his name was Carl Rogers. So Carl Rogers is the name you'll see on the show page when you go to CourtneyAnderson.com and come to the episode 202 page. And so Carl Rogers lived a very, relatively speaking, long and fruitful life, and researched and wrote and taught on these concepts of happiness. And so there's a link on the show page to a resource out of the UK, and it is addressing some of the content that Carl Rogers was most known for. And it asked this question, and I put the link so you can click on it on the show page and read the full document. But it asked the question: can we make people happy, or fully functioning? Is in parentheses. Can we make people happy? Well, this is great. So this is exactly, again, the question that we're asking in the show, right? And then the answer in that link from the UK is no, we can't. Wow. Okay. Well, that's either a compliment to the Oprah piece. Maybe the Oprah piece was talking about being, having a positive, happy demeanor and how that might be infectious in some settings. And maybe this other piece from the UK, which is addressing this noted scholar, Carl Rogers, and his work is maybe saying that I can't take someone who is in a state of unhappy and just solely through my own actions convert and transform them into happy, and sort of permanently or semi-permanently. So maybe there's a way that they're complementary, which I would argue is certainly possible. But the bigger issue is when we ask ourselves, and we constantly do in our programs, what's holding us back, right, from surpassing our goals? And one of the things that we do is we get caught in sort of cul-de-sacs, mental and behavioral cul-de-sacs, where we're just literally, we're in a street and it's the end of the street. It's a circle. It's a cul-de-sac. There's nowhere to go, and you just drive around in circles in that little cul-de-sac. We're not getting anywhere. We're certainly not meeting our goals. We're not surpassing our goals. And one of the things that can trap people is this belief that we can make other people happy. So as I've shared in other programs, one of the things that I found really wonderful in my life was I got the education and the professional credentials to permit me to be an attorney in the U.S. And so one of the things that I did in my law firm was have the exposure to family legal issues. And so that would be divorces, people broke up, and child custody issues, which may be part of a divorce or separate. Maybe the people weren't married legally, but they have children, and so now there's a custody issue. There's a child support issue, which is a financial arrangement for the children. And I worked on and have worked on and continue to work on to this day, now almost entirely as a volunteer lawyer. I provide legal volunteer services, to be of service to the community. But I do a lot of it again in these family law areas because it's a common thing. People have a lot of legal questions and concerns, and over and over again, I've encountered this belief that someone has that they can make someone happy, and that belief has led them and kept them in one of these cul-de-sacs of counterproductive, repetitive behavior. So, in other words, someone says, "Hey, I really wanted to make my wife happy. I really wanted to make my wife happy, right? Happy wife, happy life. I just really wanted to make my wife happy. And I've been doing everything I can to make my wife happy. And I work extra hours and 2 jobs or 3 jobs, and I get her everything I can afford, and I sacrifice everything, my time, my health, my energy, everything. I just want to make her happy. And yet she's not happy. And I know she's not happy because she tells me she's not happy. And in some cases, I've worked with people who not only is the person unhappy and pervasively unhappy, continually unhappy, but they're also abusive. Sometimes they're verbally abusive, sometimes they're physically abusive, sometimes they do the silent treatment. We did a whole show here in this show on silent treatment and that type of abuse, right? Where you render someone, where you intentionally act as if someone doesn't exist and has no value as a human. The silent treatment is a very cruel type of abuse and behavior. So if you haven't taken part in that show, please do. So of course it's on the CourtneyAnderson.com main site. You want to understand that if you believe you can make other people happy, then of course, as we mentioned a little bit ago, it leads you to the next question was, okay, well then how do I do it? And should I do more of it? And you take the responsibility on, because if you can fix it, quote unquote, right, someone's unhappiness, then of course you should, especially for someone that you love and care about. The challenge is that in real life, people get caught in very distressing patterns where they believe they can make someone happy, and they're doing everything they can think of. They're doing everything that they're told by the other person would make them happy, and they keep doing it, and it's quote not working, right? The person still is unhappy. What do you do with that? And I've like I said, it's in so many places in our lives. And I just gave some examples. It's very common in families. Spouses want to make each other happy. Adult children want to make adult parents happy. Parents want to make minor children happy. All types of people want to make other people happy, and then people become so frustrated and they actually get angry with themselves because they feel like they're failing, right? They say, well, I've been doing all of these things and they're not happy. What's wrong with me? And and they turn it towards themselves without starting to really ask themselves, is the premise accurate? Is the premise that you can make someone else happy, is that even an accurate assumption? Now, I've got the link here to some of this sort of scientific information that's telling us, no, you cannot make someone happy. And then I've linked on the show page to some of the reasons why this one scholar says that we can't. And basically it comes down to a really good quote that I like. So there's another link on the show page to a different resource on the same scholar and scientist Carl Rogers, which I do encourage you to read about, not just the links on the show page, but on your own, because if it's a global leading scholar on something, then we need to at least check out and see what their basic assertions were. Whether or not we agree with them is a different issue. We should be aware of them, right? Knowledge is definitely an asset. So here's a quote from Carl Rogers. It says, as no one else can know how we perceive, we are the best experts on ourselves. Now this ties in with many of the shows that we've done. We talked about this, right? The idea that together, you and I are working together on these programs, on shows, on classes or seminars or webinars, but that this is a collaboration, and that you have a responsibility and I have a responsibility, and that in terms of your own life, you're in charge. It's your life. You're the expert. And from Carl Rogers, the argument was that no one else knows how you perceive things because no one else is in your mind, in your body, looking out into the world and has experienced exactly the same things that you've experienced. Only you have. And so here's some of the reasons why Carl Rogers talks about people being unhappy and why we, external to that person, we can't do this. We can't control or manipulate their happiness or lack thereof. They have to make their own analysis and their own decisions and their own behavioral choices. So one of the things that Carl Rogers is known for is this idea of sort of, and this is very simplified, but that sort of the best we can be is this concept of being self-actualized. The self-actualization is sort of the ideal state that humans can get to, and in this state, we're going to be able to get out there and kind of get the best out of life, right? This is when we're self-actualized, then we're going to be able to, in sort of relating it to our parlance, we're going to be able to, meet and surpass our goals, right? We're going to live the dream. And so one of the things that Carl Rogers argues is that you're not going to be able to sort of reach this state of self-actualization unless you have this precedent state of congruence. So what does all this mean in English? All right. Rogers talks about your ideal self and your self-image, right? So your ideal self and sort of your real self. Okay? So your ideal self is who you would like to be. And I've got a link on the show page to a resource that I'm pulling some of the quotes from and I'm paraphrasing them, but where I'm getting this content. And these are sort of central Carl Rogers ideas. So here we are, you and I, right now, we're engaged in this, we're doing the program together. Okay, so you have in your own mind your version of who you would like to be. That's your ideal self. And you also have in your own mind your version of your real self, or who you actually are. So your ideal self might be, glamorous, funny, popular person who has a gorgeous farmhouse and lives in rolling hills and has an entirely amazing collection of animals and is a horseback rider, a champion horseback rider, and has 7 children and is a noted weightlifter. Okay, so you might be thinking, well, that's really detailed. Well, yeah, this is your ideal self. This is in your own head. And the really difficult thing that Carl Rogers is putting forth is that this all resides inside your head, and nobody else actually even knows who your ideal self is, really. Because they don't know what you're thinking. Only you do. And they don't know how you perceive things. And so the ideal self is sort of that, who you think you should be, right? Who you would like to be. All right. And like I said, it may be that you live in the rolling hills and the farmhouse and you're a champion weightlifter and horseback rider, and this is your version of who you would like to be. Okay, got it. Now, on the other hand, you have this other thing, which is this idea of who you think you are, your real self, what you actually do. And congruence is exactly what it sounds like, the word being congruent, right? That these two things want to align and match up. So, very oversimplified, the more that your ideal self matches your real life, then the more congruent you have, those two things, they match, right? And then the higher the likelihood that you're going to have this state of self-actualization and have the ability then to, be happy and fulfilled and be of service and all these really great things, right? And it makes, in my interpretation of my life experience, this makes a lot of logical sense. So if in my head I think, well, I should live in a rolling farmhouse in the hills and I should be a, champion, horseback rider and weightlifter and have, this wonderful collection of livestock and animals. And if I really live like that, so if you wake up in the morning and you look where you live and you think, oh, this is the farmhouse of my dreams, forget that. This is better than the farmhouse of my dreams. I'm not only a champion, horseback rider, I'm even better than I dreamed in my ideal self. My livestock and my animal, family is even more awesome than I dreamed. And I'm not only a weightlifter, but I'm one of the best weightlifters in the history of the world. If you wake up and your real life, what you're actually doing, matches, right, this congruence, your ideal fantasy of what you think you should be, what you would want to be like, right? Then it makes sense that, well, duh, yeah, you probably are feeling better. I've mentioned this concept in many other programs, the idea of doing everything that you can so that your life matches what you want it to be. And we have, in fact, the whole underlying, one of the fundamental premises we discuss all the time, surpassing your goals, right? What's holding you back from surpassing your goals. And we talk about constantly the idea of practicing the joyful art of business, which is this entire concept of if you're going to go out and do things, we just call it business. It could be for pay or it could be volunteer. It's irrelevant in our analysis. But if you do stuff, you should feel good about it. If you do stuff and you're miserable and you hate it and you dread it, then it's not working for you. And when I'm arguing the joyful art of business and practicing that is that you have to take responsibility. You have to be vigilant and you have to monitor and ask yourself, how do I feel, right? And when you realize I feel horrible or I feel numb, I'm bored. Those are red flags, warning, alert, change. Don't keep doing that stuff because you're just not working. You're not happy. And what I'm saying in my own ways is I'm doing everything I can to make the argument. It's your individual responsibility for how you see yourself ideally and what you do in real life to match. And of course, part of where I got this from, of course, as I said, one of my major areas of study in one of my graduate degrees was this, psychology. And these are my areas of interest, obviously. It's why, we do programs on it. And the idea of congruence, it makes sense. And I've shared in my own anecdotal stories in different, shows here in this series and in our other shows and speeches I've given and things I've written, the thing that has brought me an intense amount of contentment in life has been that my daily life matches and in many ways exceeds what my ideal life fantasy was. I do wake up and I look around and I think, wow, this is great. This is exactly, more than I dreamed of. I love this place. I love how I live. I love my work. I love the people I get to meet. I love the things I do. I like it all. I look in the mirror when I brush my teeth and I think, oh yeah, you look exactly like or better than, and some days a little worse than, my ideal self. I look in the mirror and I think, yeah, that's perfect. That's exactly what I would want to look like. Now that sounds weird, and I don't mean it in a sense like I look in the mirror and think, yes, that's the most fabulous, gorgeous, wonderful face ever. No, it's not that. But in my own, way, in my mind, I do like what I see. It does match my ideal self. Now, I'll see something like, let's say I had breakout, right, with a pimple or a zit, and I'll think, oh my goodness, I need to put some medicine on that. Or if I didn't get enough sleep, I'll look and I'll think, oh, my eyes, they look a little tired. I need to get more rest. Whatever. But in general, yeah, I do match my ideal. Now, you may think to yourself, well, that's a weird ideal that you have. You have a really weird idea to be like a, middle-aged, middle-sized you. That's your ideal. But the truth is, yeah, it is. And when I get hard on myself sometimes, and I've talked about this in other shows, I'll think, oh, I got to be more serious about monitoring my physical body. And that's one of the things I'm on now, right? It's not enough to just be like, oh, I fit in my clothes and I look nice in my own interpretation. But, really, how am I eating? How am I, exercising? What type of nutrition am I planning to partake in for the rest of the, week or, so treat myself well, treat my cells well. So yeah, there's a lot of work I have to do, but in general, I do match what I think it should match. Now, I don't know if that was just, I realized at some point early in life, this is me, and I'm not going to be, 6 feet tall and look totally differently. I'm on a good day, I'm 5'3", sometimes 3.5 inches is what I've measured. Or I thought I've measured. Maybe I stood on my tippy toes. I don't really know. It's kind of irrelevant. But this is it. And I actually really do look in the mirror and think that's my ideal self. Now, like I said, sometimes I'll think, oh, goodness, look at you. You didn't get enough sleep, or, you got to do something about your skin there or whatever. But in general, yeah, I do think this is it. And all the stuff I do, the work and the of service and my friends and the places I go and the things I do, it either matches my ideal or it's more than I even thought. It's more exciting and more interesting or more fun or whatever. So it does work. And that's what calms me down when I get really anxious or concerned or start to feel stressed out. It does help that when I talk about it, and we've done shows, we do that whole series on the satisfaction saturation series. We talk about what do you do after you surpass your goals. And I've talked about in that series, that it's really imperative that you set new goals for yourself, right? So you don't get complacent, you don't just sit around and do nothing all the time. But that it's a great rewarding feeling to feel like you're living the dream. Now the really cool thing is that, just as that quote that I read earlier from Carl Rogers said that, no one else knows how you perceive things, right? You're the best expert on yourself. That also means that you get to make your own individualized ideal self. Like if you think, oh, I need to be a certain height or look like a supermodel, and you do look like a supermodel and you're unhappy, then you're in trouble. You're also in trouble if you're not 6 feet tall and you're just obsessed with that in your head, like, oh, if I was only that, if I looked like that, if I was that size or shape or, color or whatever. It's, to me, so counterproductive. Again, the idea is congruence. And so what people do is that, Carl Rogers' analysis is that we try to make these things fit, right? The bigger the gap between my ideal self, right, who I would like to be, and then who I see myself to actually be, my real self, the bigger the gap between those, the more they're incongruent, then the worse it is for me. And I'm going to be, unhappy and engage in really destructive behavior, potentially. And you can see why, right? Like just at a basic human level. If you wake up and you're like, oh, this is where I live, this is what I do, this is my family, this is my pet, this is my work, this is my career, this is my, my body, and these are, this is my hair and whatever. Like the more you pile that gap between what you would like and what you have, the bigger the gap is, the more they're incongruent, then the worse your situation is. And so some people, when they have that, they go and chase trying to make their real life match their ideal, right? And that's where you get all types of things that people do. Some of it very healthy, I want to educate myself. I want to learn more about the world, right? I need to eat better, seeing things I was just talking about. You get other people who say, well, I'm going to, operate. I'm going to go get physical surgery on my body so I can try to be that thing. My ideal is, and I've read this in the last couple of years, people will have like a fictional ideal of a doll, like a Barbie doll or some sort of a cartoon. And then they'll go and they'll get real life physical surgery to try to look like the cartoon or the Barbie doll, which in some ways could be fine and very healthy. And in other ways, if somebody's, really going under invasive surgery and anesthesia and risking all types of, potential complications, at some point, it might be that's not necessarily maybe the healthiest path. And remember, what we're trying to do, the goal is congruence, because Carl Rogers argues congruence is the conditioned precedent for self-actualization, which is this kind of state where you're able to fulfill sort of your greatest abilities. But you can see why that would be the motivation. You can see why if somebody had it was incongruent, right? They didn't match. There's a gap between how they felt their ideal self should be and what they felt their real self was. You can sort of see why to them it would seem logical. Well, I'll just fix my real self to match the ideal self, and then I'll have congruence, and then I'd feel happier. I would just maybe ask that the idea of again, it's very medically risky when we have invasive procedures and anesthesia and all types of things, and some people never reach that. It never seems like it gets closer. It seems like the space between the ideal and their real just stays so far apart. And you'll see these extreme examples, of course, in the media, where somebody's had, tens of surgeries, and it's been, decades of them, quote, trying to fix it, and they still aren't happy. In my own way, on a very small scale, like I said, if I have an inflamed part of my skin, I'll put some cream on there to try to deal with a pimple or a zit. Or I'll make sure I get my sleep, or, whatever, maybe put makeup on if I feel like, my eyes look a little tired. So that's my version of it. It's just a less invasive and less time-consuming process, but it's the same thing. I'm trying to have my ideal self match my real self. I'm just doing it on a much smaller scale, because the smaller the gap is, right, that's the incongruency, then the easier my life will be. And of course, if it takes 90 seconds to grab something that's like $2 in my bathroom and put it on my face, and then, now my ideal self matches my real self, that's much less time-consuming or stressful or risky than, I need to go to surgery for, 10 years and try to alter everything. But it's the same process. So none of us are immune from this. We're all, according to Carl Rogers' analysis, if this is something you think about, and I'm putting forward in this show that whether or not he's the scholar that you would necessarily concur with his assertions, that the idea that we cannot make other people happy, right? The show says you cannot make other people happy. That's true. It's not a myth. It's true. We cannot make other people happy. And I'm explaining that one of the main reasons why we can't make other people happy is because other people in their own head have their own issues with congruence and incongruence. And they have their own ideal self that you'll never know the totality of their ideal self, because if they sat there and told you, it's gonna be really complicated. And it's a lifetime of experiences and aspirations and dreams and everything that goes into this. And most of us are embarrassed. And the other thing is, how many people really want to sit and listen to us really give our entire ideal self? I gave the example a while ago, right? The person lives in the rolling hills and they're a horseback rider and a weightlifter and they have all these, livestock, and people would think, well, that's a really detailed thing. Well, yeah, your ideal self is detailed. You've been living with yourself for all these years. Since, whenever you became aware that you existed. So there's a lot to process. And it's impacted by your family of origin. It's impacted by your environment. It's impacted by the society and the culture. It's impacted by the temperature that you've lived in or that you live in now. It's impacted by, popular music and art and poems and poetry that you read and movies that you watch. It's impacted by all that stuff. It's impacted by the kids you knew when you were 7 years old, and this whole thing about acceptance and whether or not you felt that you as a person had intrinsic value, that you were accepted unconditionally, or whether or not you felt you were only accepted if you met certain conditions. If you felt, my grandfather only accepts me if I, play baseball because he loves baseball. And if I don't play baseball well, he doesn't accept me. So when it's conditional, it impacts the way you see yourself. But the core question is, does your ideal self line up with and match your real life self? So again, this Carl Rogers had a lot of, obviously, research, and one of the things that he's known for was his approach to education of people in the field of psychology who would be going into therapy as the providers. And so I thought this was really interesting. He was discussing this idea about professionals like himself who are, scholars and licensed and credentialed in the field of psychology, or in counseling, and his research and ideas about providing therapy. And so this is, again, the show link this is a book, and it's on Carl Rogers, and it's on becoming a person. So there's a link to it on the show page, and it says he's talking about counseling. So he's talking to other counseling professionals, and he says this. He's talking about his counseling. He says, there was, in fact, just one problem with all the people he saw. So he's talking about him as a counselor, as a therapist, as a professional psychology expert, and treating people in that setting. And he's saying that even though people had all these other problems, they said, oh, my marriage is the problem, my job is the problem, my weight is the problem, my physical self is the problem, my grandmother's abuse is the problem, my sister's harassment is the problem. Whatever they all said, he said that there was really just one problem. He says, in fact, there was just one problem with all the people he saw. They were desperate to become their real selves, to be allowed to drop the false roles or masks with which they had approached life to date. They were usually very concerned with what others thought of them and what they ought to be doing in given situations. So this here ties into so many shows we've done, right? We did the show about the Eleanor Roosevelt quote, right? You wouldn't be so concerned, worried about what other people thought of you if you realized how little they do think of you. And it's, again, this same idea that people get this thing in their head. It's a combination of all this stuff, right? It's a little, it's a little of your genes, it's a little of your environment, it's a little of your personality. And there's a lot of research on exactly what that recipe is, of what percentage of where, but all this stuff combines, and you have in your head this ideal self. And he was saying that when he was treating people in therapy as a professional, that no matter what it was that they were actually describing, that the real problem was that they wanted to they wanted to be their real self. And they felt like they were pretending all the time, like they were putting on a mask or probably playing a role, because they thought that's what other people wanted them to do. And that they felt other people wouldn't like them or love them or care about them or pay attention to them or hire them or marry them or live with them or talk to them or whatever if they didn't put on the mask and play the role. And that, there again, the gap, right? It's incongruent. So their ideal self and their real self should match. If you feel like they don't match, but you're pretending to be something so that other people you hope will then like you or love you or care about you or whatever, then of course you're unhappy because there's incongruent. You're faking it in life, in your own life. And it's one of the reasons why when we do that, when I talk about practicing the joyful art of business, we talk so much about people who have, very high, powerful positions and prestige and income, and they're miserable. And that's a lot of it. People get into that because they thought it's what would make them happy, because they thought other people would then magically value them in some way. But they forgot to remember that they have to value themselves. And if what you do in real life doesn't match your ideal life, you're in trouble for unhappiness. And there's nothing I can do for you. There's nothing you could do for me. What we have to do individually is decide that we're going to do everything in our power to get some congruence. And again, in a healthy way. So some people say, well, yeah, that's why I'm going to have 30 physical surgeries to try to change my body. Well, okay. Again, that may be risky, and we may get to a point where there's some unhealthy sacrifices we're making. But on the other hand, you have to start asking yourself, I think, one, this ideal thing. Where's some of that stuff coming from? And is it really what you want, or is it what somebody else wants? And a lot of it, when you dig in with people and spend time listening and talking, they really themselves didn't want to live, in a rolling farmhouse. They just said that because that's what their grandmother wanted. And they just felt like, if I say this or I do this, then in some weird way that would make that relationship, even though the other person may not even be alive anymore, that would make it right. That the person would have respected and loved and cared for them in the way that they felt would have been helpful. And so we play out all this stuff in our head, and it's not even really our ideal self. But the thing is, when you lie to yourself, because you are you. Like, you're in your own head. You may trick other people or fool other people with a mask, or by pretending to play a role that you really you despise. You may, trick them because they're not in your head. They don't know what you really think. But you haven't tricked yourself, and that's where the conflict is. Because you do know that there's a conflict. And there's a gap between your ideal life. If your ideal life is, hey, I want to be an accountant and work in a big city, and drive a 4-door truck and ride a motorcycle on weekends, but you don't do any of that, well, who do you hurt? You hurt you. And you're unhappy, yes. And there's nothing that your wife, your husband, your child, your parent, your sibling, your friend, your boss, your coworker, your neighbor, there's no house or car or watch or plane or yacht. There's nothing you can buy or achieve. There's no award you can win. There's nothing that you can do externally to fix the gap, the gap between what you really, 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 really want and what you're doing. And I've totally oversimplified, huge amounts of bodies of scholarship and work, but for the purposes of our program, one, I have to, and two, I'm trying to tie it to my premise, which is you and I cannot make other people happy. I wish we could, because then we could solve like every problem in life right now, right? We could put an end to war. There would be no more lawsuits. There'd be no more crime, probably, right? If I could just make you happy. But I can't. And you can't make me happy. And we can't make those in our life that we really desperately want to make happy. We can't do it. Because it's all in their internal ability to be honest with themselves about what they really want, right? The ideal self. And then to take the action in real life to make their real life match their ideal life. And you can't do that. And like I said, most of us don't even know what their real ideal life is because they won't even tell us. Sometimes people are so, burdened unnecessarily, in my opinion, with this, weird, it's not weird. I mean, if somebody's ideal self is they want to be an accountant and live in the big city and drive a four-door truck and they live in a part of the world and their culture and society says to them, that's stupid, or it's shameful, or it's embarrassing, or it's dumb, or, they're losers if they want that, or they're prohibited from doing it, right? They have to move somewhere else to do that. Then you can see why people then don't ever want to admit this because they get, a lot of negative feedback for it. But what I'm saying is we are adults. The beauty of our program and all the things that I do, we're adults, and that means we're free. And if we haven't taken ownership of our freedom, then now is the time because we're not little children. We're not prohibited by our age. We're not 6 years old, and there's no way for us to make decisions and exert influence in our lives. We're adults, so it's time. Whatever it is. Now, of course, there are going to be outliers where somebody's going to say, well, my ideal self is to, be a criminal and do bad things. Okay, well, that's totally a very small subset of the population. It's a different type of situation. It's unethical, I would argue. Obviously, it's illegal and by definition, so maybe you want to think about that. But honestly, if you think about it as a human situation, a lot of the things that you're in one part of the planet and it's illegal and it's a horrible thing, if you go somewhere else, it's totally not illegal or a thing people even care about. So maybe just go somewhere else. We've talked about this in other programs. This is our chance to start with ourselves and do everything in our power to make ourselves happy. And we're going to do what we can to really peel back the honest truth and the lies and pretend things we tell other people. And we're going to be honest with ourselves about what our ideal self really is, what we would like. And then we're going to make healthy choices and do what we need to align our healthy self ideals with what we really do in real life. So that when you wake up, you're like, this is it. This is what I wanted it to be, and I'm doing it, and it feels so good. I feel like myself. That's what we're chasing. And it's a lot of work. It's a lifetime of work for us individually. But it means it's a lifetime of work for other people. So I do want to say as we come to the close of this show, sometimes I get frustrated. And I know I share it in speeches and programs and shows and seminars, with people who are just mired in misery because it's so draining and it's so heavy, just emotionally. But I do want to be really clear. I understand the challenge that we face fighting for the congruence. It is not easy. And it is a life of work, monitoring and asking ourselves and being honest with ourselves and then taking the risks to go out there and create that life. And you know what? Other people, honestly, I say it all the time in these shows, go back to that idea. You wouldn't worry about what they say about you or think about you if you realize how little they do. They're thinking about themselves. You are not the center of their world. They are. Which is, in some ways, there's excessive parts. People can become narcissists, things of this nature. But in general, they should be thinking about themselves and pursuing congruence, right, with their ideal self and their real self. But when you get that gap, and I have seen this, I've really seen it with people who have a lot of education and credentials, right, which makes sense. So, I'm around people in the law field, legal professionals, and I'm around sometimes educators or other people with a lot of education. And when that gap between what they think they should have in terms of their life and what they really have, that gap, and I think maybe because they have invested, years and years and years and years in advanced knowledge and education and credentialing, they become really angry. And it's sad because in my mind, well, this is great. Like, you're already ahead of the game, right? You have a lot of skills and credentials. all we have to do now is sort of look at the big picture and ask, what you really want, and then take the steps to make that happen. But people rarely will do that. And then they kind of step back and get in these really destructive behaviors with denial and self-sabotage and all the things that people can do to just, stay in misery. People deploy defense mechanisms. People will distort things because they're trying so hard. You and I and everybody, we're trying to get congruence. I want to wake up and look in the mirror and look around where I am and be like, this is the dream. This was my ideal, and I'm here. And I can just say from my own personal experience, the more you do that, the easier life is. It really is. Now, bad stuff happens to everybody, but when you have sort of this foundation where it does match, you really do have a ton of reserve resources for when just horrible stuff happens, right? Maybe a natural disaster or whatever. And I encourage you to have the empathy for people who have not either recognized what they're doing or what's going on, or had the strength and the bravery to be honest about what their ideal issues and ideal selves are, and to take those steps. And as we close, I'll give an anecdote I've shared in many other programs, right? So, about 15 years ago, I was, practicing law and had my law business and doing well economically. And I knew it didn't totally match. I knew it partially matched my ideal life because some of it was, matching, but I felt, inside this isn't totally matching. And I went on the internet and just found a random job posting for a little organization in Kansas City, Missouri, or Kansas City, Kansas, can't remember which one now, that wanted to hire a lawyer to go out for a couple of days and do some seminar training on some legal issues at work. And I saw that and I thought to myself, you know what? I don't know, I've never heard of this, not really sure, but I'm going to try it. And I went out and I tried that, and that's how I began to learn about the whole entire thing of being a keynote speaker, a motivational speaker, a seminar trainer, a corporate educator. I didn't know about any of this stuff. And I got teased mercilessly. I've shared this before, that I would come back and go to court, on a law case. And one time I went to court on a law case, and a whole bunch of lawyers were sitting in a room. It was a criminal case, and so it was a meeting where defense attorneys, which is what I do, met with prosecutors to talk about, their cases and see what the prosecutors were looking at, potentially recommending on that case. And in front of a room of lawyers, one of the prosecutors was just teasing me, making fun of me. Are you going to do your motivational speeches? And the thing is, yeah. And I said it with such pride, I don't care that everybody laughs at me, or, I really don't. This is about me and me finding a place where my ideal self and my regular real self match as much as possible. And I'm going to pursue that all the way until my time is up on this planet. Because why not? And the alternative is to be a miserable, unhappy person with a, quote, good job that, quote, makes, good money and squanders that on unhappiness. And I know so many people like that. I'm not going to do that. I refuse to do that. And if I got, my ideal self is telling me that I need to go out and, be a basket weaver or, do anything, I will do it. Absolutely. This is my chance at some semblance of whether it's congruence towards self-actualization, or it's just contentment or happiness or inner peace or whatever you want to label it with, but this is my shot, and I'm taking it, and I've been taking it. And I strongly encourage you to do so. And remember, other people, you're just a passing thing on their radar. When people tease me or whatever, it's not like they think about me that much. It just happened to be that I was standing in front of them, and they remembered, something about teasing me they wanted to do, and they did it, but they don't really care about me. Not in a negative way, but look, they have their own life. I will never be anything but proud of chasing the congruence between the ideal and my real life. Because that is what's given me, I believe, the ability to be here, to do the show today, and to continue to invest in us, and being alive, and doing what we can to enjoy it. And the alternative is awful. Life of misery because you got the mask and you're playing the role. It's what you think other people want of you. Other people really aren't even really paying attention to you that much. And what a waste. What a total waste. So again, the show was, you cannot make other people happy. You cannot make another person happy. That was the show. That is not a myth. It is accurate. It is true. It's true. We cannot make another person happy. And I gave you some analysis, start off with some sort of media, popular culture with Oprah, saying that maybe there's some things that you can do. I would think maybe more of a temporary sense to be of service and share your gratitude, but that would necessitate that you actually had some deep happiness. And the way you get to your own happiness, I made the argument, and I used Carl Rogers' research in my very oversimplified and I'm sure mangled in many ways, quest to explain why. And I strongly encourage you at least to investigate and explore these ideas and ask yourself, when you wake up and you're aware, oh, okay, I'm awake. Is it the life that you would like? And the thing is, nobody knows but you. So when you pretend, oh, it's fine, I'm okay. You just have to take what you get in life. Here, look. You suffer, and I guarantee you that the people that are in your life that are closest to you, that they know it, and it makes them really sad. We've talked about in all of these programs that we do that touches on the issue of the community of caring, which is the idea that there are people in your life who are in your community of caring, and how do you know that? Because your happiness is their happiness. So when you're happy, they're happy. When you're sad, they're sad. So when you go around pretending and lying, oh, I'm okay, when you're not, then they know that you're not, and then now they're hurting them too. Why are you doing this? Don't do this. I don't care how you approach it. I don't care how you analyze it. I don't care what information or what research you find to be the most credible. You need to get up and feel in general, not every second of every day, but in general, that, yeah, this is it. You are living the dream. This is exactly what the dream was. And this is awesome. It will free you of so much unhappiness and pain. And then it will allow you to go out there, as the Oprah piece at the beginning of the show we talked about, to try to be of service to others. But you'll be in a very small group in terms of the population numbers when you step up and you take ownership of this. So start with yourself. Make yourself happy. And yes, it's weird. And yes, other people will say great things to you, and some people say horrible things to you. And honestly, it's not about them. It's about you. And when you get to that point where you have congruence, or whatever term or whatever way that you see it, where your life matches your dream, you know how much better you're going to be able to help other people. I was in the airport a day before yesterday, and I saw this lady. I was waiting, for a plane, and she had a little kid in a stroller, the baby. And now I don't know. I just saw a little glimpse of their life in the airport. But the way that this, and I'm assuming she was the mom, I don't know, but the way she was interacting with and playing with, and just her body language with that baby, I sat there and I almost was moved to tears. You could just see that this is somebody, or at least in that moment, who that was their ideal. And we were in a crowded airport, and the flight they were getting on actually was delayed. And other people were complaining, and other babies were yelling, and other people with children were, making angry faces and frustration. And she radiated just such joy. And even when I'm assuming it was her child, would sort of, look a little cranky, she would play with her, and it was beautiful. I really honestly sat there and almost started crying. It was so, because it was beautiful. When you see someone, that's their thing, right? Whether it being a mom, under the most yucky circumstances. This is late in the day with canceled flight for them, and people standing around angry, and look at that. It was awesome. And you'll see it. You see it. I talk about it all the time, in a business, and it's like that person really enjoys that. Look at how much, happiness it brings them. Yeah, they really do. And it doesn't matter what it is. It's just that it matches. There's congruence. Look how much good you can do for yourself and for other people when that's your thing. And that matches. And look at how much damage you do for yourself and to other people when it's like that was not your thing. And the majority of people that I see, it's not their thing. That was the only adult-child interaction I saw like that at the airport. I saw a lot of angry, frustrated. I saw adults ignoring the kids. I saw adults chastising them. Of course it was tough. Of course it was not an ideal situation. But what I'm saying is that when somebody has a whole laundry list of things that don't match their ideal, and then you throw on an extra thing, right? So they're frustrated. That wasn't what they wanted. It wasn't where they wanted to be. Maybe they have financial pressure. Maybe they're angry that they're, at the airport to begin with. Maybe they're mad about having to travel. Maybe it's all a disaster. And then on top of it, the flights are canceled. Then you get really not good outcomes. If you get somebody who's like, this is my dream, and my ideal dream was to be with this kid. And yeah, maybe we're at the airport and it's crowded and there's not even a seat and I'm having to stand, but I don't care. This is my dream. This was it. Then when something goes wrong, like, okay, it's canceled or we're having to have a delay, who cares? You're doing your thing. This is the dream that you had. You're living it. And I cannot tell you how much that motivated me and inspired me. And I don't know those people, but it was great. So get out there and accept that other people are going to have to engage in a lifelong process for their own happiness. You're going to do the same thing for yourself. The main thing we're going to focus on is your ideal life, matching up with your real life. And then once you move through that process, which is going to be a continual work in progress, you need to go work and find other people who are on the same path you are, that they're working toward congruence, or they're having increased amounts of congruence. Because if you try to match up an incongruent person and a congruent person, is a disaster. And it's upsetting for both parties, because the person whose ideal life doesn't match their real life is so angry, and they're just disappointed and they're hurt and they're scared and they're frightened. And then when someone comes around that's it's matching and they're just sort of radiating, as the Oprah article said, they're deeply happy, then that makes the person who's incongruent often even angrier. Like, how dare that person be that happy, right? So it doesn't help. But when you have somebody who's chasing congruence and then getting, taste of it, and they see other people in congruence, like I told you, I saw with the adult, which I assume to be the mother or caregiver of the child at the airport, I was inspired by that. It really was. It made me happier to see that happiness. But you got to find your own tribe, and you got to work with people who are, pursuing the same things that you are. If you don't, you're going to be overwhelmed and sort of the misery and the anger, and it makes people who are in the incongruent situation really, really, again, very, very angry when they see people who are congruent, because then it just triggers more stuff in them. Well, why is that not me? How dare they be like that? And it's very, very destructive. So this, I hope, was an insightful show. As always, I encourage you to come to CourtneyAnderson.com. I do ask you, if you find our show somewhere on one of our distribution channel partners on iTunes or Stitcher or Libsyn or Spreaker or anywhere in the world, leave your review or rating. That helps us immensely. Share your feedback with me. Let me know. And when you visit our CourtneyAnderson.com site and you see our advertisers, you see something on there and you think, oh, I would like to buy one of those, or look at that, click on that link on our show so that our show sponsors know you came from us. And I am on Twitter. I am on a social media outlet. And I'm at Zealous Business, So go ahead and check that out if you'd like to. But thank you for being here, and continue to work. This is, again, it's going to be a lifelong process, congruence. But my personal experience has been that it is totally worth it. It is totally worth it. It just makes life so easy. When you look around and you're like, wow, this is it. This is exactly what I dreamed, or better than I dreamed. It just makes life easy. Especially when really bad stuff happens, because you got these reserves, of goodwill and good nature. Just make your life easier. All right. Thank you for joining us.